Trump's bizarre Gaza takeover video has sparked everything from backlash and applause to weird looks and even accusations of homoerotic wokeism. Measles is back in the United States and it just killed a kid in Texas, but don't worry, RFK Jr. says he's on the case. What the hell is and isn't actually in the Trump spending bill that just passed? And we finish out today's show with a positive news story for the first time in weeks. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco Show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. Have you ever found yourself daydreaming of a vacation filled with gold statues of Trump, Elon Musk eating hummus, and propaganda music? Because if so, oh boy, does the President of the United States have an AI video for you. Because last night, Trump posted a video seemingly of his vision for Gaza depicting children running out of rubble and into a palm tree-lined resort town, all while this song is playing.
No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one.
And if that felt a little is back in the United States and it just killed a kid in Texas, but don't worry, RFK Jr. says he's on the case. What the hell is and isn't actually in the Trump spending bill that just passed? And we finish out today's show with a positive news story for the first time in weeks. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco Show. You daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. Have you ever found yourself daydreaming of a vacation filled with gold statues of Trump, Elon Musk eating hummus, and propaganda music? Because if so, oh boy, does the President of the United States have an AI video for you. Because last night, Trump posted a video, seemingly of his vision for Gaza depicting children running out of rubble and into a palm tree-lined resort town, all while this song is playing.
No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light.
Trump's bizarre Gaza takeover video has sparked everything from backlash and applause to weird looks and even accusations of homoerotic people have highlighted some of the stranger moments there, like Elon Musk and children dancing. But don't worry, RFK Jr. says he's on the case. What the hell is and isn't actually in the Trump spending bill that just passed? We finish out today's show with a positive news story for the first time in weeks. We're talking about all that. It's kind of much more on today's brand new Philip Frankel show daily dive into the news, disturbed you with others saying, it's not too surprising because Trump has expressed interest. Have you ever found yourself daydreaming of a vacation into what he called the Riviera of the Middle East, or within previous Elon Musk eating hummus and propaganda music? Because if so, oh boy, does the President of the United States have an AI video for you. Because last night, Trump posted a video, seemingly of his vision for Gaza depicting children running out of rubble and into a palm tree-lined resort town, all while this song is playing.
No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza number one.
And if that felt a little bit like sensory overload, it would be hard to blame you. Right? And people have highlighted some of the stranger moments there, like Elon Musk and children dancing in money, bearded belly dancers on the beach, a Trump Gaza tower, shirtless Trump sipping poolside brewskis with Netanyahu, and a massive Trump statue and kid carrying a golden Trump balloon. Like, it's kind of a Mickey Mouse and Disneyland situation. And while some were shocked and disturbed, you had others saying, it's not too surprising because Trump has expressed interest in taking Gaza and turning it into what he called the Riviera of the Middle East, right, with him previously proposing that the United States would take over the Gaza Strip, a move that would displace the 2 million Palestinians living in the currently war-torn area, though his administration later suggested this would only be temporary. Though obviously, he faced a ton of backlash for suggesting that, with a UN spokesperson, for example, saying that any forced displacement of people is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Though hopping back to the video, it ended up getting a fair share of heat, though tons of people were mocking it, right? Some noting the gender fluidity of the bearded belly dancers and saying that Trump Gaza actually looks woke, with others writing, "Make Gaza great again," with an AI-generated video we didn't watch super carefully before we posted it. But this also, as you had some just genuinely appalled that the President of the United States posted this clip to his social media platforms, with folks saying things like the Trump Gaza video is quite possibly the most disgusting, the most shameful, the most hideous public communication by a US president in living memory, and saying it's not just a moral failure, it's a deliberate, calculated display of cruelty. As well as Trump sees Gaza not as a home to millions of human beings, but as an empty plot of land for his next branding project. The lives of Palestinians mean nothing to him. They are simply an obstacle to be bulldozed over for casinos, golf courses, and beachfront resorts. Sick person. And while of course, with this, there were some that loved the Trump video, right? Seeing it as Trump just doing some epic trolling, there were also some Trump supporters who were condemning it as well. Or with seeing comments on Trump's Instagram saying things like, "I voted for you, but what the hell is this?" As well as responses on Truth Social saying, "Bearded belly dancers, you dancing with someone other than your wife? This was weird for me and I love you, Trump. This should be deleted." With some even speculating, he didn't even post this himself. It must be someone meddling with his account. And while when the Washington Post asked questions about who produced it and how Trump obtained it, the White House declined to answer, but a spokeswoman did say, President Trump has said Gaza in its current state is uninhabitable for any human being. President Trump is a visionary, and his plan to have the United States involved in Gaza's rebuilding will allow for Palestinians to resettle in new, beautiful communities while improving conditions in the region for generations to come. Though there, you had the Post noting again that Trump has given mixed answers on whether or not Palestinians would be allowed to return to and live there after U.S. rebuilding. But yeah, that's the situation, and I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts about the video in question and or our apparent memer-in-chief? But then, next up, we should talk about the sad fact that the United States just had its first death from measles since 2015. Right, and that because back in January, an outbreak was reported in West Texas, which is a rural part of the state, with officials reporting 124 cases across 9 counties as of Tuesday, up from 94 late late last week. And that is there were another 9 cases reported so far in eastern New Mexico. And just for some context here, measles is not a fucking joke, right? It's airborne, extremely contagious, and in severe cases can cause blindness, pneumonia, brain swelling, or even death. And the current figures that we've seen in Texas are that around 18 people have been hospitalized, mostly kids from 5 to 17 years old. And now we have authorities confirming that the person who died was an unvaccinated school-age child at the Covenant Children's Hospital in the city of Lubbock. Now, in case it needs to be said, though, I think that I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. The measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine are both safe and effective according to scientific research, which is why it's required for all kids entering kindergarten and public schools nationwide. But for those in homeschooling or private schools, especially religious ones, that rule doesn't apply. And it just so happens that West Texas is home to a close-knit Mennonite community. And what we're seeing is that in Gaines County, where the outbreak started, nearly 1 in 5 incoming kindergartners for the 2023-24 school year did not get the vaccine. Right? And that is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services aims for a vaccination rate of 95%, saying that that's necessary to help prevent outbreaks of this highly contagious disease. So with that said, what we've seen so far is that most of the cases in Texas are in unvaccinated people, or at least people whose vaccination status is unknown, with only 5 cases reported in people who said they had the vaccine. But also, do not mistake this as a localized situation. This is a nationwide threat. Right? Measles cases actually reached a nearly 3-decade high in 2019, and there were several outbreaks just last year, including one in Chicago that infected 60 people, none of which has been helped by the rise of the anti-vax movement in recent years. Right? And so naturally with this, you had a reporter asking Trump and RFK Jr., right, our new health secretary, who said just last month that a panel would investigate the childhood vaccine schedule about the Texas outbreak and the reported death, with Trump then immediately passing the hot potato to RFK, who restated facts that are already known about the outbreak and then added,
"We're watching it. We put out a post on it yesterday, and we're going to continue to follow it."
And so obviously we're going to have to wait to see what happens with this specific outbreak, but you have many concerned now that this is kind of just a taste of something that is going to become much more common, especially depending on how RFK Jr. moves forward in his position. Time will tell, and I guess I'll just hope for the best. But then next up, the House just passed a massive budget bill that'll pave the way for major parts of Trump's agenda, but I've also been seeing things both accurately and inaccurately explaining what's actually in this, so we should dive into it. And so to start, this legislation passed with a very narrow margin of 217 to 215, with one Republican joining all Democrats voting against it. But notably, the whole thing almost went off the rails entirely after a revolt from the far right-wing faction of the party, which wanted more spending cuts, and more moderate members who were worried that the cuts went too far. In fact, we saw Republican leaders even cancel the vote at one point before changing course minutes later after Democrats had already left for the night, forcing them to rush back in. Ultimately, they pulled it off, and they took a crucial first step in a process known as budget reconciliation, which allows the Senate to bypass a 60-vote filibuster to pass the bill. Though notably, the Senate's already passed a competing bill, so now both chambers will have to agree on a unified version. But as far as the contents of the budget bill, right, Mike Johnson's version, the idea here was to pass one enormous package that would allow Congress to pass much of Trump's legislative agenda, or what Trump keeps calling one big, beautiful bill. But a key thing is that in its current form, the legislation's not actually super specific. It's more of an overarching framework, a kind of blueprint. So for example, the proposal includes a general lump sum increase of $300 billion in unspecified funding for border security and defense programs. It would also increase the debt limit, which is the amount of money that the government's authorized to borrow to pay its bills, by $4 trillion. And arguably one of the biggest standouts is it would slash $2 trillion in federal spending over the next decade, in part to help pay for the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that were also included in this package, with most of that $4.5 trillion going to finance an extension of tax cuts that Trump put in place during his first term that are set to expire this year. With it also being widely reported that Trump has asked Republicans to include new tax policies in whatever version of the bill they finalize, right? And that including ending taxes on tips, Social Security benefits, and overtime wages, as well as increasing the cap on state and local tax deductions. And notably, while the extensions of those existing tax cuts will lower rates for almost all Americans, it's being reported that the wealthiest citizens stand to benefit the most. In fact, according to an analysis by the Center for American Progress, the majority of the tax cuts, nearly 60% or $2.5 trillion, that'll go to the top 10% of taxpayers earning more than $228,000 a year. Though there, I think the next stat's even more wild, because a whopping 30% of the cuts, more than $1.24 trillion, that'll go to the top 1% of earners who make more than $743,000 annually. Or to put it another way, a way that I think is easier to understand or consume, is that the top 1% of earners will be seeing a tax cut averaging $62,000, which notably is higher than the annual family income for most of the 72 million Americans who have health insurance through Medicaid. And I bring up Medicaid because we've seen many Democrats accusing Republicans of plotting to pay for their tax cuts for the rich by cutting essential programs for low-income Americans like Medicaid and food stamps. So I will say, even some moderate Republicans have raised concerns about cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits, though, of course, they ultimately voted for the bill anyway. Though again, a big key thing here is that could also be because the House spending bill, as is, does not specify exactly what it'll slash from the federal budget as part of the $2 trillion in spending cuts. Instead, it just parses that total out among different House committees and directs them to figure out what to cut. And so with that, what we've seen is that the Energy and Commerce Committee, which notably oversees Medicaid and Medicare, being given the responsibility for the biggest cuts by far. With the spending bill, as is, directing the panel to come up with at least $880 billion to slash, which obviously is nearly half of the total $2 trillion savings that Republicans are requiring under this proposal. With that also being more than double what any other panel is being asked to cut. The second biggest request is at least $330 billion, which will be decided by the Education and Workforce Committee. Then after that, you have the Agriculture Committee, which oversees food stamps and is being asked to cut a minimum of $230 billion, and then another $562 billion in spending reductions. That's going out to a range of various different panels. And with all that said, I do want to note that Trump has previously said that he will not let Congress cut Medicare or Medicaid. And in fact, we saw him double down on that vow in a press conference today.
The spending bill that passed last night aims to cut $2 trillion.
Right.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud.
But with that, I'll say despite Trump's promises, it has been widely reported that Republicans are still eyeing cuts to Medicaid as well as food stamps. And this is, it doesn't appear that Trump has made the same promises to protect food stamps, which notably help feed 1 in 8 Americans, which again has fed into the argument and narrative that the GOP is wanting to cut programs for low-income citizens to finance tax cuts for the wealthy. But also a big thing beyond all that is, regardless of Trump's assurances, experts have said that it's virtually mathematically impossible for the Energy and Commerce Committee to actually cut $880 billion without cutting either Medicare or Medicaid. Right? And that because those two programs make up the vast majority of the spending that the panel oversees. And according to the New York Times, even if the committee cuts everything that's not healthcare to $0, it'll still be more than $600 billion short. And this, as they reported, there's really not any wiggle room, saying if the committee can't save at least that much, the entire effort could be imperiled because Republicans passed this bill under the budget reconciliation process to avoid the Senate filibuster. And while other Republican leaders have also echoed Trump's comment about cutting alleged fraud from the public health insurance programs, it's unclear, 1, exactly how much that would save, 2, what they would deem fraud, and 3, would even any of that still be enough? Which is why right now you have people saying that it seems like just one of two things is going to play out. Either Republican lawmakers and the president are going to have to blatantly disregard the promises that Trump made to the public on Medicaid and Medicare, or go back to the drawing board entirely. Because if Republicans want to cut as much as $2 trillion as part of any budget bill, it's going to be hard to do without touching any of the 3 areas that Trump has vowed not to cut. Right? Because together, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid account for almost half of the total $6.75 trillion that the government spent in the last fiscal year. But this also, as it's unclear if Republicans could get enough support to pass a bill that doesn't include those cuts. Right? That $2 trillion figure, that was only added in the first place in a last-minute amendment to get support from the spending hawks in the party. And they'll likely insist on a similar figure to offset the new spending that they oppose, but that will be required for Trump's massive tax cuts as well as his border and defense priorities. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment, but first, let's be real. What's the first thing you notice about people? Right? And I'll tell you what it is for a lot of people. Their smile, and they notice the same about you. Smiles are actually crucial in social interactions, and oral care is key to your overall health. That's where today's sponsor, Guru Nanda, steps in. Right? Guru Nanda follows Ayurvedic principles using natural ingredients that are genuinely beneficial for your mouth. No harsh chemicals, no bleaching agents. And their dual chamber whitening mouthwash is alcohol and fluoride free, packed with hydrogen peroxide and natural essential oils that activate an oxyburst bubble reaction that whitens teeth and freshens breath. And Guru Nanda whitening strips are gentle on teeth, mixing hydrogen peroxide with coconut extracts, and their patented toothbrush has 8,000 plus ultra soft Softex bristles, perfect for sensitive gums. And finally, their famous coconut mint pulling oil is a natural teeth whitener, blending 7 essential oils like peppermint, clove, oregano, and tea tree with vitamins D3, E, and K2 supporting happy gums. I can't imagine getting a better deal for your oral care. For under $40, you're getting naturally, ethically sourced products that whiten without damaging your teeth. So do your mouth a favor and grab the Total Smile Makeover Kit today. Just scan the code on screen or head to gurunanda.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 15% off site-wide. Your coffee-stained teeth will thank you. But then, next up, we've got news about how kids these days are so glued to their screen that before they can even learn to walk, they learn to scroll. And 1, yes, I'm officially entering my grumpy old man era, and 2, that's not the point here. The point is that we got this new report from Common Sense Media, a group that surveys parents about their kids' media consumption, and it's very, very interesting. With, for example, findings finding that 40% of children have their own tablet by age 2, and that grows to nearly 60% by age 4, with then 25% getting a personal cell phone by the age of 8. With one of the other interesting things being that the last time that they conducted this survey was right before the pandemic. So now, right, we can see how some of the numbers have changed over the past 5 years. But there, surprisingly, what they found is that for children aged 8 and younger, their average reported screen time is basically the same as it was back then, clocking in at around 2.5 hours per day. But one of the important things that has changed is the way that they're spending that time. With, traditional TV viewing declining while short-form, algorithm-driven video platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts having grabbed a greater share of kids' attention. And that's in addition to gaming, which young children now spend 65% more time doing than they used to. One of the ways that ends up being really consequential is the report notes that parents tend to have less oversight over that short-form content. And what I mean there is, like, for example, it found that over 60% of parents occasionally watch YouTube alongside their kids, but only 17%